All right. Can you say words?
I can say words. This is me saying words.
Perfect.
I know words, guys.
All right, cool. All right, I'll count it down in 3, 2, 1. This is Chris.
And Steve.
And you're listening to One Cross Radio. And if you can tell by that several second gap, we are joined once again by the one and only Steve the Manbert Lambert. Steve, how you doing today?
That's a new one for me, the Manbert Lambert. I'm doing well, Chris. Yes. Sleep deprived and yeah, all the things that go along with parenting, but I'm good.
That is correct, sir. And since you were last on the show, because we did try to record, I think late last year or early this year, I can't remember. Time has been weird. We couldn't get our internet in sync, and that episode got lost.
Yeah, I think it was in the summertime.
Yes, and then since that time, you have become a father twice over now, sir.
Well, I was already a father once. And then
yes.
I think at that point we were pregnant with our second. Yeah, so we have MJ and Hannah, 2 girls.
Yes.
And I mean, and Hannah's a year and a half. Almost,
oh my goodness.
She's a year and 4 months. So I guess, yeah, maybe it wasn't in the summer. Maybe it was even longer ago than that. So Hannah's over a year now. So.
Oh my goodness, this is bonkers. Oh man, my mind is kind of now. Insert that gif. You have kids. And listener, you can also maybe tell by the sound quality that we are recording over Skype, just because this is the easiest way for Steve and I to get together right now. So there might be some audio issues at some point. Sooner than later, I'd love to actually get together in person with Steve again. And at this point, record in his office because the house is a little full. And my house is in repair. So your office would be the way to go.
Sure. Your house is under repair?
Yeah. So we had water damage last year.
Oh, fun.
And insurance is finally slowly getting stuff fixed. So eventually, later this year, hopefully in a couple weeks, we'll have a functioning home again.
Okay.
We'll see. But it'll be nice.
Tune in next time, listener, for another episode of Home Repairs and Insurance Problems.
So Steve, we are rejoining to talk about a little ditty of a Marvel film that dropped a little bit ago recently. We are talking. Oh my gosh, yeah, it's June. Friggin'. Seriously, time is weird. And we are talking about the Multiverse of Madness, Doctor Strange #2. And Steve, what were your initial? How'd you like it, man? I don't think you and I have actually talked about it.
Yeah, we talked a little bit. We texted a little bit right afterwards. I was very conflicted about it. I think there's a lot of good about the movie. It was really well made. It was very different than anything Marvel's ever done. It was the first horror movie they've ever made. It leaned way too far into the kind of like witchcraft, Souls of the Damned realm for me, so that by the end of it I was actually super uncomfortable watching it. Not scared, but like against my conscience, like this isn't for me, which is really unfortunate. Yeah, so I it's been interesting to see. I own, because I'm an old-fashioned nerd, every single Marvel movie on DVD, seasons 1 to not Blu-ray, Chris, DVD.
Yes.
Because I love them and I've watched them, and I like, I just rewatched them all with my sister and my wife, and I was like, we're not watching them on Disney Plus. I have them on DVD. We're watching these DVDs. But then once we got to season 4, I'm like, I don't want all of these. Like, I don't really want the Eternals. I definitely am not going to buy this one. I probably anyway, so that was kind of like, yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed with some of the things in this season this season of Marvel.
we're at this point, it's more or less true. Like the honest trailers joke of it's a TV show just on the big screen is kind of accurate.
But anyway, I think there's lots of good things to talk about, like lots of things that I enjoyed about it. It was a really well-made movie, but just the content in terms of, getting into kind of demonic and witchcraft stuff, like this wasn't like Marvel magic or Harry Potter magic. This was like dark and very Sam Raimi-ish, right? Like Evil Dead kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a direction I'm not looking to go with my Marvel movies. So
yeah,
I mean, they freaking exploded what's his name's head. That was like, it was just gruesome in parts. Like I was like, wow, they straight up are like going gory in this too. So yeah. Anyway,
you know what? I think that's an interesting scene to kind of talk about, because I was like, wow, you actually made me for 5 seconds care about Black Bolt. Like
there you go.
I've never really cared for the Inhumans, let alone the terrible show.
And that show, which I have watched, again, I love the MCU, have watched every episode of, and wow, was that bad. I was like, hey, it's the dude from that dude and that guy. Like that's the Black Bolt that I watched in that show, and he looks kind of cool. And they exploded his brain. That was awful. Like
I was like, well, I just never cared about Inhumans, but I appreciate. I'm like, that's comic book Black Bolt. That's cool.
Yeah.
And
they did well with that.
And then when they came up with the solution with his mouth, I was like, oh damn. Like that's
like so anyway, let's backtrack a bit. What were your initial reaction? I think you were a lot more positive on it than I was.
Yes, just because even though I get where you're coming from with your consciousness, like that stuff doesn't weigh as much on mine as it does with you.
Yeah, because you're a heathen, stupid sinner, so that's fine.
Oh my gosh. All right, so that's why I haven't been getting church jobs. I've been wondering.
Oh, have you been putting me down as a reference? Sorry, Chris. What do you think about Chris? Well, besides the fact that he's a heathen, stupid sinner, he's a great guy.
No, so I like that stuff. Like I did notice as well. I was like, wow, they're leaning into that a bit more. It's less like Wanda hand wavy magic, and they're actually doing a bit of the dark stuff. But then I'm like, okay, that can be there from Wanda, but most of the time the darker aspect is saved for like Mephisto or the serious Ghost Rider stories, which are few and far between, because it's hard to get a serious story with a flaming skulled person riding a motorcycle. But when you look at his power set, and his backstory, you're like, it's a weird juxtaposition.
Yeah, I mean the original Ghost Rider stories, he doesn't even make a deal with Mephisto. He legitimately makes a deal with Satan. Like it's like right in the comics. I think they retcon it. Like that was, Mephisto disguised as the Christian one or whatever, but like
sorry, not to go down a Ghost Rider tangent, although it's just like that's where you'd expect a little bit more of the darker stuff. Although it's also at the same point, it was like, I guess it is within the realm like of Doctor Strange and Wanda that we could get here, but we just hadn't. But then, as you mentioned, Sam Raimi, like that's another thing. My original joke was straight up going to be like, it's nice for me to finally enjoy a superhero movie from Sam Raimi. But like Spider-Man, like jokes about Spider-Man aside, I cannot compliment enough like how well made it was. Your point of it being like the most original MCU movie in quite some time, I absolutely agree with. I think that there hasn't been a dedication to this like kind of tone and voice from a director since you could also, I'd say you could
since Shane Black and Iron Man 3.
Ugh, get out. I legit saw a GIF where it was like, I am the Mandarin, and got angry at it. I'm just like, I actively hate this. So no, I'd say since like I'd even say Thor Ragnarok, because I've seen some people say like Guardians of the Galaxy, but it had a bit more MCU-ishness than I could say Ragnarok did. Ragnarok flipped Thor on its head. That in a way that I'd compare Sam Raimi's Doctor Strange to. But if we're at the point now in Marvel movies where it's like, hey, if directors can have their original voice, but it still fit within the framework of like this this tangential long story, then I'm kind of game for it. But I'm also with you in the wider scope of Phase 4. Phase 4 has just been kind of It's a little aimless. I don't know if they know exactly where they're going. They don't have the build up to Thanos anymore. So it's just kind of like
they are. I think we'll talk about this more. I think they are building up to Secret Wars.
Right.
I think that's become quite clear, especially with this movie. We're talking about incursions and having the Illuminati in it. I'm just kidding. Don't do
that. Did you throw up the diamond?
I did, but you're not recording this by video anyway. What was I saying? I think like phase 1 of the MCU wasn't really, besides like introducing all the original characters, wasn't really doing anything. Like, and some of those movies weren't great, and some of them were fine, and some of them were good. And I feel like it's like that kind of all over again on purpose.
Yeah.
Like they're like, we're just gonna throw out a bunch of stuff, and then we'll eventually tie it together and build the stuff. And you can already see like the multiverse themes that are building through it, and I mean that's been in Loki, What If, Spider-Man of all things, and then this. So they're obviously building something with that. But yeah, I mean it's not like we're going for the Infinity Gauntlet right now. Like it's just sort of like the building blocks of it, right? They've introduced how many new characters and concepts.
Oh yeah, I still haven't seen Shang-Chi.
You haven't seen Shang-Chi yet?
No.
That's one of the better ones, I think, of this phase.
And I think that's also like, we'll get back to Doctor Strange, but I think that speaks to the weird spot Phase 4 is in, because Phase 4 or Season 4, as we can jokingly call it, even though like Phase 2 was like, hey, we're going to introduce Ant-Man, we're going to introduce Guardians, like they were still, Ant-Man's small enough, and Guardians is off on the pun intended, and then Guardians is off on its own enough that it's like, hey, you can introduce, but you still had a relative through line for the story. Whereas Phase 4 has been like, hey, we got to drop a sequel to Spider-Man that also wraps up some of that stuff. We got to wrap up Black Widow's story while introducing a new Black Widow. And then we're doing the shows, which are going to be connected, but not to the film stories necessarily. Yes and no, like they are, but one internet reviewer, Jeremy Johns, pointed out, like with this movie, if you haven't seen WandaVision, you're going to be lost. And I think that's quite fair. But it's still very much like Phase 4 has some of that Phase 1 issues of, we're introducing while continuing, and we're building up again, but we're still, say what you will about Phase 1, it's still like you saw the end goal. The end goal was the first Avengers movie. Whereas with this, it's like,
that's true.
We're building up.
We don't even know what the short-term goal is in this one. Yeah,
exactly. So that's where I'm like, as a comic fan, I'm like, great, I've got a plethora of choices. But then especially because we just had like 10 years of build up to like 2 dynamite movies. It's almost like, man, we've gone back several steps. So
and I think they can afford that, right? Like, so I think we were saying off.
Like they're DC.
Yeah, they've got some capital in the bank, literally and otherwise. They also have like we were saying off air that the pandemic's really screwed up their plans a lot, right? So they've had to deal with that. And I mean, I think especially in the shows, it's apparent that the pandemic has kind of screwed some things up for them. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of, I think Fantastic Four is going to be the capstone of Phase 4, which I think makes sense thematically, and they've finally started to kind of build to it a little bit. That's my theory, but
I think we can tie that back into Doctor Strange. I think that's a good segue. One of the big scenes in the movie. And like, we can break down the whole movie, but I actually did mean to ask you, what was your opinion of the Illuminati scene and who they included?
I mean, I enjoyed that. So I mean, they teased, you know, the most of the big ones except for Mr. Fantastic in the trailer, right? So you knew that Captain Carter from well, I don't know if it's the one from What If, but the, you know, some version of Captain Carter. They had shown not just Professor X, but like the X-Men 97 Professor X. And you know, they're making the cartoon of that at some point, like continuing the series. So and that seemed like they were trying to do some synergy there with that. I didn't really care about Monica Rambeau as Captain Marvel, and yeah, it was cool seeing John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic.
I actually loved that.
and I was, as we said before, pleased to see Black Bolt again, and I was like, I can't believe they went with the same guy from that show, and we're like, let's just do it. And then we actually got to see his powers in the kind of flashback of what they did when they killed their Doctor Strange. That was pretty cool. Yeah. So I mean, I know that you're pretty much always going to love Jim from The Office when he shows up and stuff. Yeah, you were excited to see him as Mr. Fantastic?
Well, yes, and not just, well, a bit, because I'll always love John Krasinski. I think he can be a terrific actor. But also, that had been a fan cast, like one of those fan casts for a while, that I was like, all right, that'd actually be cool. Because I'm not huge on Fantastic Four. So for me, what's also going to help connect for me is like the right actor, the right performer, and I enjoyed the little bit of time he was there. And then it was just one of those like, that's cool. And that was one of those like long rumored things. I was actually a bit nervous going into Doctor Strange just because of how many ridiculous rumors had come out for it. And it's just like leaning into the multiverse of madness stuff. I'm like, if half of these are true, there's no way this movie could work. It's going to collapse under the weight of itself.
Yeah.
And it pulled itself off. I loved Jim as Mr. Fantastic. Now, of course, I kind of want him as Mr. Fantastic going forward, but I'm also curious just how they're going to pull off the Fantastic Four, because I think that's a tough character pool to introduce off the bat. In a way, I look at it similar to the mutants, like how they're going to make that work. I think that's going to be a challenge for the MCU. I'm interested to see how they go.
But I don't agree that the Fantastic Four is difficult to do. I mean, I think the problem with the past three, you could even say 4 films if you do the one from the 90s that never got released. The problem with those films is they didn't understand what the Fantastic Four were, right? I mean, those original Fantastic Four, or those 2000 Fantastic Four movies came out in the hype of like, let's just throw everything out there, and like they don't understand that they're a family, right? They're a family, and they're adventurers more than they are superheroes, and they just were like the young adult superhero, group. Or again, like you can't have you have to understand what the heart of the property is in order to pull it off, I think, right? So I think that's really important, and I think I trust the MCU to do that well. The one criticism I heard about John Krasinski that I can see is that like Reed Richards is supposed to be the smartest man in the. Oh, my computer's making weird noises. It's supposed to be it's like something just let off steam. Reed Richards is supposed to be the smartest man in the world. And his portrayal in the comics is like he's almost on the spectrum sometimes. Like he just neglects his family and gets lost in his work. And Jim's just a little bit too much like the everyman, right? He just shows up and he just does his thing. And I liked him. I didn't think he was a bad actor. Although, I mean, I think all those guys kind of just did a green screen appearance, read some lines from at home. But yeah, he doesn't have that like weird quirkiness that even like Ewan Gruffudd did in the original, the 2000 Fantastic Four movie. I mean,
yeah.
I mean,
I think. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think I'm not gonna say like I don't want to see him again or whatever, but you know, that's one criticism that I heard that I was like, I can understand that. So
I think that's fair. Although at the same point, I'd be like, we had Fantastic on the screen for, I think, in a cumulative like 3 or maybe Fantastic 4 minutes. Like he was really not there that long.
sure.
And I think out of other stuff I've seen him in, when I'm even specifically thinking of A Quiet Place,
Sure.
which he like wrote, directed, and then starred in, where I think he could give maybe more of that Reed Richards that they're looking for, but it also might be challenging because like when you see Krasinski, you're like, you want the Krasinski charm, you want the Jim aloofness almost. So it could be interesting. I was just going to say, to speak to the Fantastic Four, I think you summed it up great. I think what some stuff the other movies struggled with, and then even myself, like it's very much like your summation is great, and that's how I got to focus on it. Because when I think Fantastic Four, I still think of the time it was created in, and it still channels that, and it still carries a number of those 60s aesthetics where I'm like, that's where it's going to be difficult to insert it into modern time. But if you can just focus on the family stuff and then not do the ultimate Fantastic Four, or go to Simpsons on it where it's the dysfunctional family too much, then
well, I like Doctor Strange's joke about Fantastic Four. That must have trended well in the 60s or something like that. You
know, and that was actually something that was like one of the interesting scene there for me in the movie, where I'm like, that's how you can have the impact of selling Wanda's evil, because she just killed off like 4 or 5 beloved characters, but of little consequence because they're from different universes,
and like,
but it still has an impact.
Brutally killed them, right? Like she popped Reed Richards' head. She
shredded him.
Yeah, she spaghettified him, and then she popped his, like they zoomed out so you couldn't see it in detail, but his head exploded.
Yeah.
And I mean, she cut Captain Carter in half. She, threw that thing down on Captain Marvel.
She broke Professor X's neck.
Oh yeah, that's true too. Like in the astral zone.
In the psychic.
Yeah, I mean it was a brutal scene. Like it was crazy. I think we should talk more about the actual movie as a whole, though, because that's like that was one scene in it. I think one thing that this movie did really, really, really well is that if you watched the trailer, you were left thinking this movie is a follow-up on the What If show, right? Like Doctor Strange facing off with the evil Doctor Strange, probably meeting zombies, and the Captain Carter that we've already seen. And that's just not what it was at all, right? Like you find out in the first 10 minutes or whatever, 15 minutes that Wanda's the bad guy, which they're not prepared for at all. And like the zombie was a misdirect. Everything was a misdirect from that trailer. They did a great job of interesting you and then completely flipping everything.
In some ways it made the marketing, not in terms of tone, but it made me like, with Ragnarok, it was like a Thor buddy cop movie with the Hulk. So with Multiverse of Madness, they made it look like, oh, it's going to be like Wanda and Doctor Strange going off through the multiverse. No, and then it was such a and that was such a great bait and switch, because I'm like, man, just evil Doctor Strange isn't going to be like, it could work, but it's like, that's not going to be the most interesting villain. So I loved that curveball. I forgot that America Chavez was going to be in the movie. I thought and you know what, I got to give them kudos. I thought they made it work. I'm not huge on America Chavez. I know the character had promise when she was introduced in the comics, and then there was her solo run, which was not good.
I haven't read anything with her in it, so
her first solo run is terrible. It was at the height of people criticizing Marvel for getting too woke, but in this case it was legit bad writing and shoehorned in messages and nothing. It was just really bad writing. So then it was one of those like, oh, okay, if you get in America, like she's gonna have that. But I like the actress playing her. I'm not like a huge fan, but of the character.
Yeah.
But I was like, cool, why not? And she functioned well in the movie. Like I know some people said, oh, there's not enough story for her. Where I'm like, well, it's also not fully her story.
She's the
And
MacGuffin, right? She's not really driving the,
exactly,
like doing anything. She's just the chase this thing.
she
Yeah.
is the thing to get to move the story.
Yeah.
Like
She's the rabbit's paw from Mission Impossible 3 and
if
or
you
monkey's
if
paw,
you
monkey's paw.
like if we want more of her story, then I'm sure we can get it in
We're in a Young Avengers thing, right? I
a
mean,
Young
that's one of the
Avengers
things.
or a Disney Plus or
Well, so I think probably in Disney Plus and maybe in a movie, they are going to make it like they've introduced every single original member of the Young Avengers except for Iron Lad, who is a young version of Kang, who they've already introduced, and Hulkling, who is half Kree, half Skrull, and they've got the
right.
Secret Invasion TV show coming out, so that's definitely going to come up. And then they've already introduced some of the extra members of the Young Avengers, young Loki and America Chavez, who came in later. So. So they're doing a Young Avengers something, right? They have every single member there except for a couple which are definitely coming up soon.
On a side note, when they announced Secret Invasion, I just got mad at the Captain Marvel movie all over again. I'm just like, oh, come on. Like,
yeah.
Anyways, one thing I loved with this movie, aside from the performances, I love Benedict Cumberbatch performance. I think I almost said Mary Elizabeth Winstead, but that's not her name at all. Elizabeth Olsen. I think she like stole the show for me. I thought she was tremendous, and
she acted hard.
She carried her grief and trauma so well, and it was one of those things where. Sorry, Jill's bobbing her head as she walks in.
Hi, Jill.
Steve says hi, babe. She says, Steve.
I heard her.
Okay. So, like, I thought her performance was great. And it was one of those where too often in movies where it's like, oh, we got to make you feel sympathetic for the bad guy who we're just introducing. Or I'm like, no, you feel sympathetic for Wanda because you've been with her for this past while and you can see how we got here and it makes sense and you understand it and it hurts. So it's just one of those things where you're like, oh man, like you're going off the deep end. I get why, but and I thought she was tremendous. She was one of the like just great. Her performance was outstanding. The other improvement I think on this one over the first Doctor Strange is it gave Rachel McAdams something to do.
Sure.
She wasn't just the love interest who was there for like 20 minutes. Like she actually, her character actually had something to do. I felt their connection more in this one than the last one. And it being after the relationship was interesting. So
yeah. And I think, I mean, it was interesting. Like I do kind of feel like with everything that was going on in this movie, and there was a lot going on in this movie, they were able to kind of put in a couple moments that showed some growth in interesting character moments for Doctor Strange too, right? Like, and partially just seeing the versions of himself in the multiverse and how awful most of them are, right? And the way that people react to him always having to be the hero and always having to be the one holding the scalpel, and kind of these themes showing up and being like, I don't want to be like that. And admitting to alternate Christine, he has a hard time getting close to people because his brother or sister died and it was his fault. And none of that was super like, let's really dive deep into this, but there was a subtle hints of that I think they kind of showed us more than told us with the dimension hopping. I thought that was pretty cool. And the part where he says that he needs to face his fear, right? I've been afraid of getting close to people, and I don't know if she says it or he says it, to face that fear. And then at the post-credit scene, Clea shows up, who is like his love interest, and they're married at one point in the comics. Which, I mean, Charlize Theron is now just showing up in cameos of this is where we are in the MCU. But he says like, I'm not afraid. like I'm not going to be afraid. I'm going to go in and face it with you. So that's kind of like talking about that relational side of things with him too. So appreciate that.
Yeah.
Best scene of the movie.
Sorry, I missed like half of that.
Oh, really?
Because the internet cut out.
Do you want me to say it again?
Yeah. Could you?
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I trying to remember what I said. There's a lot going on in this movie, right? And they still managed to put in a couple things that showed character growth and a kind of a journey for Doctor Strange. Starting with the wedding, but also I think mostly rather than telling us stuff, they showed us through the dimension hopping and him seeing alternate versions of himself. That most of them are jerks, and they are like the criticism that they always have to be the one holding the scalpel. They always have to win. They don't trust anyone else. He realizes that's true and that's not what he wants to be, right? And so he makes decisions in this movie based on what he's seen of other versions of himself and is able to grow as a result of that. And he humbles himself and bows to Wong at the end, and he doesn't kill America even when she gives him permission and trusts her, even though that was a little bit of like, oh, it's the end, now it's going to work kind of. But it showed his his growth in that. And there's even the part where he admits to alternate Christine, right, that he's afraid of getting close to people because of his sibling that died. That was his fault. And she talks about him facing his fears. And then when Charlize Theron shows up as Clea, who was his wife and love interest in the comics, in that cameo at the end, the end credit scene, she asks him if he's afraid, and he says no. So it's kind of like that, like, I'm willing to take these steps and grow and move on. So yeah, it was a little bit because there was so much other stuff, but it was there, and I appreciated how they did that. Yeah.
I also did like how he was, even though he was like, yes, it was the only way to go, like to allow the snap, like he was still seemed haunted and challenged by it. And I do like that, where it gives the time, like too often in movies says like, hey, the right thing is, yes, it's the right thing, but it's also like, then everything's easy, where it's like, no, man, sometimes the right thing is going to hurt. And it still did for him years later. I also found it interesting. Now, did he say, I can't remember, did he say in the movie that Spider-Man was Peter Parker, or did he just mention Spider-Man but not Peter Parker?
He just mentioned Spider-Man.
Okay, yeah. So that follow through is still there, where he doesn't remember.
I think one thing that's really worth mentioning is the best scene in the whole movie was that music fight between the alternate versions of himself, when they have that battle in his Sanctum Sanctorum in the messed up world. Oh, you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, sorry. I mean that scene was visually stunning. It was awesome. It sounded cool. That was really neat. Like going into the bonker stuff of magic. I really enjoyed that scene a lot. It was pretty cool. So
I think that scene is the thing that most reminded me of some of the visual style from the first movie. The first movie, especially as they went into the mirror dimension, and it was like incepting itself.
Right.
This movie didn't do that stuff as much, so it was visually, even though consistent, a different movie. But that part reminded me of some of that visual flair that we got in the first Doctor Strange, while still doing its own thing. And yeah, that was definitely a highlight. I don't think the third eye is going to last long. I'm just tossing that out there.
Well, I mean, he can close it, so I mean, they can pull it in whenever they want to. I think so. Some nitpicks about the movie, and one of which would include the fact that I do think Sam Raimi's vision and the MCU watered down of it kind of fight against each other, right? As much as I didn't like the Cloak of the Damned that he had at the end and the Zombie Strange or whatever, like the movie ends, if you take out the scenes, on like a horror moment where he like screams in agony, this eye pops out of his head because he had used the what do you call it, the Darkhold,
the Necronomicon. Like, let's
what?
That's I called it the Necronomicon, which is like the book, basically the Book of the Damned from Evil Dead.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the Darkhold is a thing from the comics too. It is the Book of the Damned.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
it's
then
just strictly because of Sam Raimi.
Yeah, and then you cut to the next scene and he's okay again. It's just kind of like that kind of like was a cool ending to the movie in a horror kind of way. And then it's like, okay, but he's fine. He's with Clea now. So that's one of the things. This is another really dumb nitpick that I had was the multiverse just started, right? Like in Loki. And yet they're saying that every time you dream, it's you seeing other versions of yourself. It's like, well, but what about before Loki did that, right? Like, what did it mean then? So I kind of like, I don't know. That's just dumb. I can get over that, but that was the nitpick that I had.
That's fair. Oh, I've got to finish Loki too. I'm way behind on my shows.
Yeah. Loki directly ties into this multiverse stuff, so you should finish that.
Yeah. If it had Andrew Garfield showing up and stealing the show, then
yeah.
I will never stop singing the virtues of No Way Home. That to me is just an amazing movie.
One of my favorite scenes, one of my favorite little moments in the movie is when they're running away from Wanda in the Illuminati compound or whatever, and they hear this like noise coming down the hallway. It sounds like something's coming after them, and then it's just Doctor Strange squealing around the corners on his shoes when he slides. Just like that kind of like horror humor. I mean, I laughed out loud for that part. That was good. I really enjoyed that.
That's something that I thought Sam Raimi brought like a lot of interesting stuff too. As you're talking about it, I'm just like, you know what? If like, even though it might not be my first choice, but if they were to do
I lost you, Chris.
Marvel.
You there?
Were to get or in. Oh shoot! Yeah. Yes, I am.
I heard it wouldn't be my first choice, but if they were to do, and then I didn't hear anything after that.
Okay. Yeah. No. Basically, I was searching for my thought anyway. So
that wasn't the computer. That was just you thinking.
I think Marvel. One of the interesting things is it's at the point almost where you, especially with the multiverse stuff, it could allow itself to do a bit more auteur films where it doesn't have to go R-rated like Logan, but think of the vision and specific style that had. Like you could do that with other stuff, and I think Marvel, not that it has to do like dark magic stuff, but there's enough characters that lend themselves to the horror realm that it's like, yeah, friggin' let Sam Raimi do if you were ever going to do Marvel Zombies or something like that, that could work with him or someone like that. So,
well, once again, watch What If first.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely will.
What do you do? You have any predictions for the future for where some of the things from this will lead?
I don't know. Just because I also it's one of those things where, I mean, coming out of the first Doctor Strange, I didn't think this would be the next movie.
Sure.
Like I thought we'd get a follow-up with Mordo, and
so apparently there's a deleted scene that was the first scene in the movie where Mordo comes to Wanda to ask for help to destroy all magicians, and she just straight up murders him. And so like in that version, you find out like right away she's the bad guy. They kind of imply in this movie that like he's been active trying to get at Strange.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, apparently in the original cut, that was like she just like straight up murks him in the first scene. So
would have been a tone setter.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Definitely would have been a tone setter. So like that's the thing with Doctor Strange. Just because his stories can be so big and different that I'm just not sure. But I'm also not sure where the
Yeah.
where MCU is going. Where I'm like, okay, but where does he tie into this? Where does his story go?
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's the thing. I don't think they're going to lean into that third eye much. One, because they already showed he can cover it up, but then two, I'm also like, this just very much feels like Thor getting the eye patch in Ragnarok, where I'm like, that's going to get undone pretty early into the next movie.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: do you think Wanda's dead?
No.
No. Okay.
Now I think with the they might give her character a break, but Wanda is not only within the MCU now too pivotal of a character, because I think they've made her that. I also think there's too many riches for that character with other shows and properties. Like if you need a person brought back for a Doctor Strange villain or something, Wanda. If you need mutants, Wanda. X-Men stuff.
You think she's coming back as a bad guy?
I'm not sure if she'll come back as a bad guy. I just don't think she's gone.
Okay. So here's my theory. I think she's pretty irredeemable as is, right? Like they've shown her doing some pretty horrific things. But they also said there's a prophecy that the Scarlet Witch would either destroy or rule the cosmos, right? And she did not even close to either of those things in this movie. So they have heavily implied that, first of all, the Kang stuff is going to lead to like a multiversal war.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know, you haven't seen the end of Loki, but that's in there. And secondly, they've talked about several times in this movie about incursions, which is from not the original 1985 Secret Wars, but the kind of redone story of Secret Wars that they did in 2015. Jonathan Hickman wrote a story where universes started colliding with each other and destroying each other. And so there's a comic, The New Avengers, that Jonathan Hickman wrote that was basically the Illuminati, which is a group that Brian Michael Bendis started in his earlier Avengers run, are basically like Reed Richards, Namor, Black Panther, Professor Xavier, except I think he was dead at that point, so probably the Beast, Doctor Strange, Tony Stark. They get together and like, what do we do to stop our universe from getting destroyed? And they end up like just straight up destroying other universes to protect their universe over and over and over
again.
Send
Hulk into space.
Yeah, well, that's previous to this, right? That's another thing.
Right.
But so in that story, they eventually start happening so fast they can't stop them anymore. And so Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom combine their powers to take all the pieces of whatever's been left over to create a new world, where Doctor Doom is God Emperor Doom. He rules the world, and his like it kind of holds it together by the force of his will. And so my theory is that we are going to get Secret Wars as kind of the end cap to whatever, the next 3 phases or whatever. And that Wanda is going to play a big role in that. She might have Doctor Doom's role, or maybe Doctor Strange's role in, having a hand in destroying, but also ruling over the multiverse, or the universe of the world that's left over after all this happens.
Right.
I think she's going to have a role in that. I think it's probably going to be an alternate version of her. I think the one that we got is gone and dead. So I think that's where it's going. I mean, both the Illuminati and Clea, that at the end we're talking about those incursions, which is the universes colliding. And so I think we're gonna go there. I don't know if it's gonna be in the Doctor Strange story, but I mean, the Clea thing kind of suggests that it will be, but I think we'll see that at some point. And I think Wanda will have a big part of that, and Doctor Strange.
Nice.
So that's my big theory coming out of it.
I like it. When you were talking, I thought like a whole new world. Instantly started singing Disney in my head. Yeah, it's, I don't know. I think with Wanda, like I think there's room for this Wanda to continue. Like, I know we did the sacrifice play at the end, because she was really exposed to like just how messed up she had become. So I still think there's room for that. It's just like one of those things where I'm like, unless you're dusted, like, okay, no, not even dusted, like dusted in the second movie, or die directly on screen and we see your body, I'm not gonna, I'm just like, we didn't see your body. We didn't see the hand under the rubble. There's so much there where I'm like, she might be injured, but I don't think she's dead yet.
Yeah, and it is magic, right? But I guess the reason that I go for an alternate version of her is because even if she's not dead, what do you do with her at this point? Oh, you still there? Yeah. Oh.
Yes,
oh.
yes, I am.
Did you?
Oh, Steve.
Did you catch any of that?
Yeah. Yeah, you said, what do you do with her at this point?
Yeah, I just feel like, in terms of being a hero, at least in the MCU, I mean, she straight up like murdered all of Kamar-Taj. She's, and people in alternate universes too, and she's done some pretty dark stuff. So I don't know. I feel like it'd be pretty hand wavy. They're like, oh, we're gonna accept you now, and you're a hero again. Like, yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I don't think she'd ever slot right back into like, hey, I'm a hero again. Although at the same point, in the comics, you look at the track record of like Magneto being accepted as a hero and a villain, or Wolverine's a hero and he's murdered thousands of people.
Sure. Sure.
So it's just like, I do get you. I think there's still more stories to do with her, but not your traditional like, hey, she's the good guy stories.
Yeah. And I wonder if the White Vision will ever come. Like, what we'll see with that, because he's still out there somewhere, right?
Well, exactly. And I think she ties too much, like she's got too much of a tie to the X-Men side of things, that's where I don't think like regular old Wanda is gone yet. I still think there's enough there that they can tie her in other ways.
I wonder what will happen with that, because the comics have actually kind of separated them. She's not a mutant. She's not Magneto's daughter anymore. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm also, which was dumb. I'm also just not sure how they're gonna. The mutants are the thing that I'm trying to figure out how they're gonna balance that. I just honestly don't know how you do how you pull off the discrimination aspect about them having superpowers when we're in a world where everybody's got, well, not everybody, but a lot of people have superpowers, including Ned, evidently.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
coming out of Doctor Strange, I liked the first movie. It wasn't amazing, but it was still a lot of fun. I liked this one a lot more than I thought I would. The story was quite different than I thought it would be. The brief glimpses we got of different multiverses were kind of cool. I can't remember which one, but there was a brief one where I'm like, I hope this is how we get Squirrel Girl. Give me Squirrel Girl, Steve. And I'm excited to see where it's gonna go. I'm just not sure how where it ties in, or how it picks up some of the loose threads from that first story with Mordo. Because now I also kind of feel like, aside from murking him, like, I don't know if he sits there as a threat, or there's too, like, the magic is too ingrained now for, like, with Kamar-Taj and everything, for it to be like, oh yeah, no, he's just out murking people. So it's just like one of those, like, I don't know where to go from there.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I think we've covered it.
I think so too. So yeah, in short, I really enjoyed it. There was more things I liked than I didn't like. For the most part, thoroughly enjoyed it. But it's just like one of those, I'm curious what's going on with the MCU and where stuff's going.
Sure.
So here, while we've still got some time, I did an episode, but I would be amiss if I didn't get your thoughts recorded on No Way Home, sir.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was in one of those theaters where there was like this idiot that was like weeping and yelling and cheering, and I'm not saying that guy was me, but it was me. Yeah, I don't think I've ever had as loud of a reaction to a movie in my life. In the theaters especially, thoroughly enjoyed just about every moment of that movie. Yeah, some of the same things that I listened to that podcast that you did for that. Some of the same things that you said, right? Like Andrew Garfield was awesome. I mean, when he saves MJ,
bruh.
You know, I was all over that, right? I was like, as soon as I saw her fall and they showed him, I was like, no way, that's awesome, and just like yelling and cheering and crying and yeah, I mean, and the movie has its problems, right? Like Doctor Strange kind of jumps into that spell without really defining what they're talking about, and Ned having powers is kind of dumb. But I mean, I also love the part where he finds out that like Peter's best friend in all these universes tries to kill him, and he's like, I promise I won't do that. Without context for his Peter, and it's so awkward. And I mean, Tom Holland did a great job. Willem Dafoe makes me wonder why they ever put a mask on that guy. Like, he was the scariest version of the Green Goblin that I've ever seen. Just his face is so crazy. So that was, and I just like the purple sweater over. Like they just did a good job of kind of capturing closer to the comics. I'm a little bit confused about the whole Uncle Ben thing because, like they kind of implied that he was there a couple times in the previous movies, but then like May wasn't even buried next to him. So I don't know whatever, they did a good job of you still there? Yeah, they did a good job of doing the power responsibility thing. They did a good job of doing the power responsibility thing with May. So I thought that was a really great scene. I'm really interested to see where they go from here. I've liked all the Spider-Man movies so far, with the big asterisks of I hate that he has Stark Tech and can call a private jet to pick him up from Holland and like fabricate a suit on the way. Like that stuff is like, that's not Spider-Man. And it's like, oh, okay, so now we've got to the end of his actual origin story. Yeah. I'm like, all right, what's next? Because I want to see this, right? So I'd love to see like off the top of my head, I'd love to see Scorpion next out of the J. Jonah Jameson stuff. Kind of get him, the Scorpion that we saw originally, get hired by Jameson. Yeah. I'd love to see the Vulture again, but have you heard what happened to him?
No.
He's in the Morbius universe now. Sony took him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he ended up like talking to Morbius at the end of I just saw the end credit scene because Sony is so ridiculous with these properties. But yeah, I think a really cool next episode or next installment would be Scorpion, the Black Cat, as kind of like a love interest of him trying to figure out what to do. I think it'd be really cool to see MJ go off to school and come back as like trying to be someone she's not, like a party girl. Like you see a little closer to the comic accurate MJ, and then Peter realizing that him not being in her life is actually not good for her, and that he provides some kind of stability for her. Oh, sorry. What was the last thing you heard?
See MJ go off and
I'd love to see her go off to school and then like come back and she's kind of changed who she is to try and kind of fit in or whatever, and like she's more like the party girl from the comics, and then Peter who's kind of thinking maybe me not being with her is better for her, and realizing, oh, actually no, it's not. Like I know who she is and this isn't it. Right. Those are the kinds of things that, like off the top of my head, I think would be cool to see next. If they ever hired me to write this, which they shouldn't. But yeah, I obviously loved it, and I've only seen it twice, but I really enjoyed it both times, and I have, a couple nitpicks here and there, but I really think they're great. And it was a little bit off-putting when you realize that they reused footage from Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3. Like they didn't get Rhys Ifans or Thomas Hayden Church in. They just did like CG, so that he was the Lizard and the Sandman all the way through, right. And then they voiced it. And the scenes at the end where they turn back into themselves are like 100% clipped footage from the previous movies that they were in. And as soon as you see that, you can't unsee it, and it's a little weird. But I guess that was probably just pandemic stuff and things that they dealt with. But yeah, anyway, I it's funny. It's way more funny the second time than I remembered it being the first time. And it's moving and it's powerful, and it was just a lot of fun. I also what was I going to say? I don't remember what I was going to say, but yes.
I'll still say, coming out of that one, I didn't think I'd want multi-franchise Spider-Man movies. Like, if it could somehow carry what we got from there, even though you could look at it as a great capper to the other two's films.
Yeah.
Coming out of that, I'm like, this solidified why Andrew Garfield was my favorite Spider-Man. So now, of course, I'm like, all right, give him a good writer, give us another Garfield movie, and then.
Well, I mean, I think Sony's ridiculous that they're making, like, why would you make a Morbius movie with no Spider-Man in it? Well, but with no Spider-Man in it, right? Like, you could have very easily put a Spider-Man in it from one of the other universes. They're making a Kraven the Hunter movie.
The same reason they did a Venom movie without a Spider-Man.
Right. But I'm saying, like, you can make that Venom as part of the Andrew Garfield, tie it in, right? You could like, they're making a Kraven movie. You have an old Peter Parker who's married. Like, you could do Kraven's Last Hunt with him now, right? Like, who wouldn't want to see that? Yeah. Even if it's a bit cheesy. Like, I think if they put Andrew Garfield or Tobey Maguire in any of these franchise spin-off movies that they're making, I all of a sudden become 100% more interested in either of them, even if they're not going to be great. Like, I'm not going to see Kraven's Last Hunt. I'm not going to see Madame Web. I'm not going to see the El Muerto movie. Like, that's such a dumb idea. I didn't see Morbius. I only saw Venom 2 on the airplane on the way to the UK a few months ago. Like,
I didn't bother with Let There Be Carnage because I'm like, no, and I love Venom and I love Carnage, but I'm like, oh no, that's just not going to be them.
Yeah, I think, like I told you, some movies are made to be seen in theaters. Some of them you can wait to rent. This one was definitely watching an airplane in the middle of the night. Like, it was not good. So, I think I don't know if Andrew Garfield or Tobey Maguire would want to come back for any of these movies, but
I want to go to Greece later this year.
Sorry?
Oh, Steve?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, maybe if it's an option while on the plane to Greece, when Jill and I go for a wedding, maybe that's where I'll watch it.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, coming out of it, I was just, never again did I think I'd want. Would I be like, yeah, I'm down for another Tobey Maguire Spider-Man? Yeah. And I am. Now, I add caveats to that, but it's just if he's like, I so enjoyed his performance in this because he had the least dramatically to do, and that suits him as an actor because he's not that good of an actor, where it's like, hey, but as a person who was just like, I've been around the block. I've seen some crap. I've lived through some crap, and just like the bigger brother kind of role, the mentor. I was like, he was surprising. Pardon? The cool youth pastor. Yeah.
As a former youth pastor, I always love a good youth pastor joke.
Like, he was surprised. Like, with that's where I'm like, hey man, if I'm ever going to get a Mayday Parker on the big screen, it's from his universe, because him and MJ are married, and him being the mentor to Mayday, I'm like, all right, make it happen. Let me write this. Give us Mayday.
Well, I think a Kraven's Last Hunt first would be cool with them too. Like,
oh yeah, Well, that could also, because in the MC2, or like, doesn't he lose a leg or something?
Yeah.
Probably from a goblin fight.
Yeah, in the Mayday Parker story, the MC2, they started off as a what if, right? And in the original run, he's still there. In the original run, the baby
yes,
is born and stolen by an agent of the Green Goblin, and then just never seen again. Just they never mention it again. Never comes back. And so the what if story is like, what if they got that baby back? And what they do is they play out, or they show you in flashbacks, they play out the issues that actually do happen in the original run, but with him having a baby, and it changes the way he does some things. And so Norman gets blown up by one of his pumpkin bombs, but his leg is too near, so he loses his leg in it. And that happens kind of at the end of the first volume of Amazing Spider-Man in the 90s. Just that story just changed a little differently. And so then he retires as Spider-Man, and then raises her until she becomes a teenager and her powers start manifesting. And then she finds out that her dad was Spider-Man, and she becomes Spider-Girl. So,
but with the Ben Reilly suit, which was a sick suit.
Yeah. Suit. I mean, it's a little tailored too for her, but.
Oh yeah. But we can move on from that part. It's one of those where, like I said, I didn't think coming out of it that I'd want this in live action. But now I'm like, especially because there's always talk of, say, Miles. I think Miles is difficult to ingrain into the MCU with a young Peter Parker.
But they already have their Miles series, right? Into the Spider-Verse is fantastic.
Oh yeah.
They don't need to rush anything else with it.
If they were going to do it live action, I think something with Garfield could be awesome. Like that could be that Garfield redemption story, like him training Miles. I don't know, but and I'm with you, because I'm like, we got one awesome, and I'm really excited for Spider-Verse 2, especially because my boy Japanese Spider-Man's gonna be in it, and yeah,
Leopard on.
So good, so wacky.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. I think Sony is stupid if they're going to keep making movies and not try to get those guys back into them. But I mean, they've kind of already proven that point. So, yeah.
Well, my nervousness is as well. But you just did a lot of goodwill with a really good thing. Like, as much as I love Andrew Garfield and I love his Spider-Man, like him being in, even though I didn't see it, him being in Let There Be Carnage wouldn't have made it better. It would have just needed the love and care of a ground up build. Sony just needs to revamp how it does movies.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, sir. So yeah, I guess that's everything. No, I got nothing. So Steve, I guess any final thoughts or any final hopes of where MCU should go?
I think it's all heading towards a Secret Invasion, Secret Wars movie, and I'm excited for that. I'm down for that. I think the Fantastic Four movie is going to be cool. I'm looking forward to that when that comes. Like I said, this phase, Spider-Man's been amazing. Doctor Strange, though I didn't love, some of the content was well made, and Shang-Chi was good, but the other ones haven't been great. The TV shows are hit and miss. I love Hawkeye. Loki was really good. WandaVision was good. And I've enjoyed everything, but they haven't all been amazing.
Or spectacular.
Or sensational. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of in for the ride most of the time, and we'll see what happens. So
that's fair. It's definitely different than I thought it would be. To me, the next step is easily Galactus or maybe Kang. So going Secret War is very different. And it's also
Kang's already in it, right? Kang is confirmed. He's already been in the Loki show. Spoilers, Chris.
Yeah,
but
no, I've heard.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, they're definitely going to Kang first, but I think Kang will lead to something bigger in the Secret Wars thing. But we'll see.
Right. All right. Well, Steve, as always, a pleasure. We will be back because eventually we've got to do our. I think it's either the Clone Saga or 90s are just topic on 90s comics.
Comics from the 90s, yeah.
Because they got ridiculous.
They did.
Sometimes awesome, sometimes not. And yeah.
Always radical.
Always and often with horribly drawn feet.
Lots of pouches.
And lots of pouches and big guns. All right. All that being said, listener, thank you for listening. Steve, as always, thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to see and chat with you, my friend. I miss you greatly. And listeners, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of One Cross Radio. Let us know in the comments your thoughts on Doctor Strange. Was the multiverse mad enough? Was there too much chaos? I can't think of any more puns or jokes.
Yes, Chris is stupid heathen.
Am I evidently? When did this come out? What?
I don't know. We used to make that joke in our accountability groups. Like, you're a stupid sinner. That was like an ongoing joke.
That was an ongoing joke. Yes.
I just ripped on that.
We'll peel behind the curtain here. At one point, because I've got eye issues, Steve and I were joking around about him telling my youth group that my eye issues were because I looked at inappropriate things on the internet.
Well, tell them what your eye issues are. What you told me. I just get a text one day saying. The clinical term is eye herpes. I just get a text one day saying I have eye herpes. So I was making jokes about looking at bad images.
And so, listener, it's like a cold sore in the eye. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not genital herpes.
Nothing to do with what it sounds like. But it does sound like that.
Well, it's a cold sore. It's not an STD or an STI or whatever it's called now.
STI.
I actually had to break that. When I told someone, they were like, "What?" I'm like, "Okay, stop thinking what you're thinking, because think logically here. How would that happen? I want you to think about."
I think we need to end this conversation, Chris. This is going bad places.
No, I'm ending it there because they were like, "Oh yeah, there's no rational." I'm like, "Exactly, thank you."
Yeah.
Anyways, all that means. Steve, I love you. Listeners, thank you for being with us. Hope you have a wonderful day. Take care and God bless. Peace.
Bye.